painter Max Carlos Martinez struggles with questions of cultural identity.
You're making marks. You're physically making marks on the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
What mark do you want your work to leave?
I want the little kid from Old Town to have a voice.
How does your work reflect growing up Chicano in America?
When I was a kid in Albuquerque, we weren't Chicano yet. It was 1961. My siblings and I were raised American to take full advantage of the opportunities that the states provide. Education, prosperity, and pursuit of happiness. So when my father became a Chicano activist in like 71, I didn't know what it meant. But the work eventually became about those identities that clashed. Was I American? Was I Chicano? Who are we as an American? Who am I as a Chicano? Who am I as a Hispanic? Who am I as a New Mexican?
So how is the Chicano movement and your father's part in that influential to your work today?
When I was 17, my dad killed himself. Due to depression from all the work and never being able to feed all the poor. And so when my dad killed himself, the local Chicano community distanced themselves from me and my mom and my siblings. My grandma kicked us out of the house. We were basically homeless. Mom was able to buy a trailer, and we lived on the West Mesa, distant from Old Town. I was cut off from everything. But I retain that identity because it's important. It's very important.
What's important about telling the story of this place?
Landscape, family, and the roots. My family's been here for 400 years. So all of that ties into a very important story, which sometimes gets told, but is often overlooked. I spent 30 years in New York. In the beginning, when I started the family series, nobody wanted anything to do with it. They said, why don't you just go back to New Mexico and tell this story? Why should we care? But to me, it was I had to share the story of how we melted into this big pot and how I melted right along with it.
And who are some of the people from Queens of Albuquerque High?
One portrait, it's my sister. And growing up, we were just so poor, but somehow she managed to become valedictorian, and she studied, she worked hard, she sewed her own clothes, and then she got crowned Queen of Albuquerque High. And then 10 years later, so did I.
What was the inspiration for the 100 Years of Becoming series?
Pre-territorialism, we were not American. We were still here in Albuquerque. So how do you go from territorialism to statehood to be called a greasy, lazy Mexican to accepting this national identity? You could sense this spiritual vacuum that whole process created. Because you go from like this full-blooded community to something that just keeps getting torn and torn away and pulled away. And then the fighting, the infighting. At one time, we were all neighbors and all the same in these small communities. And then everybody became enemies and hurting each other. And I learned a lot about that violence of the soul and the violence towards each other.
There's an interest in stereotypes in your work. Where does that interest come from?
In doing this research of the formation of the American West, I worked from images from old gazettes that would have been like the National Enquirer of that time. And every culture was stereotyped. Women, Chinese, Black, Indian, especially Mexicans. It was horrible the way they were talked about. So it would say, who was the better race, the Chinaman or the Mexican girl? And just went on and on throughout that book, and that was partially true of the way I was raised. We didn't integrate. We stayed in our own little neighborhood, went to this school down the street. There was not a lot of mixing. And it was this racism, which still, after all this time of evolving, it seems like somehow it got worse. In every painting, there's a little bit of that story. With the Hopi series that I've been working on for a year now, I paint them every color. White, black, brown, red, gold. I mean, I paint some of them blue.
What drives you to continue making art?
I need to paint. It's the most important thing in my life. It provides a base. It provides hope. It provides love. It provides joy. Growing up so poor, and to be able to grow up to do what I love, I'm hanging on to that. I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can.